They were teenagers, good students, cheerleaders, and seemed harmless. But behind the selfies and smiles were secrets more dark than anyone could have imagined. These weren't unplanned crimes or reckless decisions. These girls planned it all out. Murders that were carried out with sickening precision, lies that were told with chilling ease, and cover-ups that duped entire communities. From a plot involving poisoned vodka to a burial in a backyard with knives and bleach, these are the stories of teenage girls behind the most notorious criminal cases in U.S. history. This is the darkest side of youth you were never meant to see. Number 1. Rachel Shea and Shalia Eddy. She believed she was going out on a fun night drive with her two closest friends. They had brought knives, bleach, a shovel, and a plan to murder her without her knowledge. This is not a plot from a campy teen horror movie. It actually did happen. Two West Virginia teens lured their best friend into the woods and stabbed her over 50 times simply because they just didn't like her anymore. Rachel Schoaf and Shelia Eddy seemed to be good girls. They smiled in photos, laughed at school, and talked in the school cafeteria. Skylar Neese was always part of their group. She was a bright kid, wanted to become an attorney, and had big dreams. To the rest of the world, the three girls were best friends. But under their sleepovers and group talks, something ugly was brewing. Skylar began to notice small things. Some jokes weren't explained to her, and whispered conversations stopped when she entered the room. And then there were the tweets. They were vague, hurtful, and aimed at someone close to her. One said, "You doing ma like that is why I'll never fully trust you." She never said who, but it was obvious. Something was seriously off between the girls. Skylar did not realize that Rachel and Shelia were discussing her in private. They were plotting and planning for weeks, choosing the location, picking the day, and even practicing what to bring. They were not nervous. They were thrilled. Shelia texted Skylar at midnight on July 5th, 2012. "Do you want to drive somewhere?" This was not unusual. The girls had gone out earlier without asking. Skylar did not hesitate. She climbed out of her bedroom window at midnight and crawled into Shelia's silver Toyota Camry. Rachel was already in the back. They told her they were going to a quiet spot in rural Pennsylvania to smoke. It was somewhere they had gone before. Somewhere she knew, somewhere cozy. Skylar didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. But what she failed to notice was what they'd stashed in the trunk. Kitchen knives, paper towels, bleach, clean clothes, and a shovel. They weren't making it up as they went along. This was step-by-step planning. When they arrived at the woods, all was well, until it wasn't. They walked into a clearing together. Then, on 3, Rachel and Shelia pulled out their knives and attacked. Skylar was screaming. She tried to run, but she was outnumbered, overpowered, and completely alone. They stabbed her over 50 times. According to Rachel's later confession, Skylar did not go down without a struggle. She fought, hard, crawling, gasping, begging them to stop. They didn't. Then they tried to bury her, but the ground was too hard. They pulled her body underneath leaves and twigs and covered her up with dirt, got into the car again like nothing had happened, and drove home silently. Two girls, covered in blood, driving home silently. The following morning, Skylar's parents discovered that her bed was empty. They believed that she had snuck out and would be back soon, but the hours dragged on painfully. When the security camera caught her getting into a car they did not recognize at midnight, they were frightened. The footage was so blurry you couldn't make out the car, a face, or a license plate. Rachel and Shelia participated in the search. They hugged Skylar's mom. They distributed flyers. They put out a call on social media for her safe return. Meanwhile, they knew where she was and what they had done. They kept telling the same lie for months. They picked her up, drove around for an hour, and dropped her off near her house. And it worked for a while, but Rachel was starting to break. By December, she was falling apart, overwhelmed, paranoid, and filled with guilt. Her parents eventually had her admitted to a psychiatric unit. And that's when the dam finally broke. On January 3rd, 2013, through sobs and panic, she confessed. She told investigators everything, how they planned it, how they killed her, and where to find the body. A month after that, human remains were found in Wayne Township Woods, Pennsylvania. Dental records were confirmed in February 2014. It was Skylar. Rachel Schoaf pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. In court, she cried and said their actions were so terrible she couldn't live with herself. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 10 years. Shelia Eddy, on the other hand, lied about everything until the evidence was too overwhelming to deny. In January 2014, she entered a plea of guilty to first-degree murder and received a sentence of life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. The two girls now find themselves in prison in West Virginia. Mary, Skylar's mother, and Dave, her father, were devastated. But they acted. The scariest part of their daughter's disappearance was how long it took to issue an Amber Alert. Because Skylar was believed to have wandered off by herself, the system did not activate. No alert was sent. No huge search was was mounted. They worked hard to change the law, and they succeeded. West Virginia enacted Schuyler's Law, under which public warnings can be issued in any instance in which a child is thought to be at risk, regardless of the presence of evidence of kidnapping. Schuyler's story was not a news headline. It was a warning. It was a tragic reminder that the hurt can be from one very close to you. Sometimes it's right next to you in math class, smiling, laughing, playing along as if they are your best friend. And that's what makes this case so terrifying. No abuse, no prior history of mental illness, no obvious factor. Just two girls who one day simply decided that their best friend no longer mattered, and they killed her because of it. Number 2. Linda Anderson's murder. Two teenage sisters from Mississauga, Ontario, killed their mother in 2003. They went out to buy milkshakes, returned home, and called 911 calmly. Why? For life insurance money and to have a good life. Linda Anderson was a single mother of 3. She had depression, drank too much, and had financial problems. She did the best she could, but her 15 and 16-year-old daughters blamed her for everything. They saw her as the reason they couldn't have what their friends had: new clothes, vacations, and a normal teenage life. By the end of 2002, they were very angry and began to make plans. The sisters discussed with their friends how they wished their mother would be dead. They discussed chat programs, searched the internet for how to kill and not get caught, and even made to-do lists. One of them joked with a classmate, "Wouldn't it be nice if she just died?" No one told an adult. No one thought they were serious. But they weren't joking. It happened on January 18th, 2003. The sisters got their mom drunk and mixed vodka with Tylenol 3 pills, which rendered her unconscious. After she was too weak to move, they carried her to the bathtub. Then one sister put her head into the water while the other just watched. When she did pass away, they bathed, dried her body, and went out with friends to party. Hours later, they returned and called 911, reporting that they had found their mom drowned, apparently from alcohol poisoning. There were no external injuries and no evidence of a struggle. The police took their word for it. Linda's death was determined to be an accident, and the case was closed. The sisters returned to school as if nothing had happened. In secret, they waited for Linda's $133,000 life insurance payout. They believed that money would change everything: a bigger house, spending cash, vacations, and freedom. But dark secrets never remain hidden for long. In early 2004, at a party, one of the sisters started boasting about the murder. She told me how they had done it and how smart they were. Someone finally listened and called the police. The investigators reopened the case and soon uncovered electronic evidence: chat records, internet searches, and diary entries. They hadn't just planned it, they had practiced it. One document even specified the duration for which they had to hold a person underwater. They were arrested in 2005 and charged with first-degree murder. Because they were minors when the crime was committed, their names were not released. Under Canadian law, their identities remained confidential for the duration of their lives. They were sentenced individually and both were found guilty. The sentence: 10 years, the juvenile maximum. That equaled 6 years in custody and 4 under supervision. While in detention, they reportedly completed their schoolwork and received therapy. One was released in 2009, the other in 2010. Now, they exist under new names, their records closed, their histories hidden. The press called them the Bathtub Girls. The nickname stuck, and so did the terror. Two honor students didn't merely murder their mom, they schemed it, concealed it, and then went out for a snack. Experts tried to explain it. Some blamed family problems. Others felt that there were signs of sociopathy or narcissism. None of this explained how two teenage girls could secretly kill their mother. Linda Anderson was no model mother. She was in trouble, financially, emotionally, mentally. But she was trying to do better, and she certainly did not deserve to be drowned in her home by the daughters she loved. The case went international. It inspired a true crime book called The Class Project: How to Kill a Mother, and a film adaptation, Perfect Sisters, featuring Abigail Breslin and Georgie Henley. Both explored the psychological turmoil behind the crime, but even Hollywood couldn't explain the coldness at its center. Worse is the short time the killers spent in jail. For a premeditated murder, they were out before they reached 21. No adult trial, no public shaming, and once they were released, their identities were erased. We'll never know if they learned their lesson. What they did, though, will never be forgotten. Two teens murdered their mother, planned it out, and nearly escaped. The title Bathtub Girls may not be humorous, but the crime itself was extremely serious. Number 3. Marlene Olive. It was 1975, and a California teenager convinced her boyfriend to murder her parents. Then she tried to burn their bodies in a public barbecue pit. This was no sudden flash of rage or spontaneous impulse. It was planned, premeditated, and carefully executed by a 16-year-old girl named Marlene Olive. Marlene was adopted by James and Naomi Olive, a wealthy couple who resided in Terra Linda. James was an ad executive. Naomi was a housewife with a history of alcoholism and mental illness. Home was chaotic, filled with shouting matches, crying spells, and constant tension. Marlene rebelled. During her teens, she was on drugs, in trouble, and fixated on the occult. She wrote in her diary about black magic and fantasized about gruesome tales of death and flight. Then, there was Chuck Riley, a 20-year-old drug dealer who tipped the scales at over 300 pounds, had very low self-esteem, and had virtually no friends. Marlene saw an opportunity. She flirted with him, flattered him, and moved in fast. Chuck was hooked. She told him how much she hated her parents and wished they were dead, and he listened. When she asked him to help, he agreed. The scheme came into effect immediately. On June 21st, 1975, Marlene left the back door open when she went shopping with her dad. Chuck broke into the house when they were out. Naomi was in bed. Chuck, who had taken LSD, had a pillow and a hammer. He hit her on the head and then smothered her to complete the act. But the scheme was foiled when James came home early. He witnessed the incident and tried to flee. Chuck shot him 4 times with a gun stolen by Marlene. After they had 2 bodies in the house, they had to move fast. They covered the bodies in bed sheets, loaded them into James's truck, and drove to China Camp State Park. At a community barbecue pit there, they attempted to burn the bodies with gasoline and firewood. Bodies are hard to burn though, and the fire left them only partially destroyed. The following day, a park ranger noticed smoke and a foul odor. In the pit, he discovered burned bones and bone shards. The police were summoned. Meanwhile, Marlene reported to her neighbors that her parents had left for vacation, but detectives soon uncovered holes in her alibi. No suitcases, no withdrawals, and no satisfactory explanation. Then Chuck broke down. He admitted everything. The murders, the planning, the failed cover-up. He said Marlene had planned it all, from unlocking the door to deciding where to burn the bodies. The case was taken to court, and the public was shocked. Chuck Riley was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. Later, the sentence was modified to life in prison when California temporarily suspended the death penalty. He was imprisoned for 35 years and released on parole in 2011. Marlene Olive got a much shorter sentence. She had been tried as a juvenile because she was 16. She was convicted of assisting in a murder and received a 6-year sentence in a reform school. She spent more than 4 years there and was paroled in 1979, more than 2 years before she was legally eligible to drink a beer. After being released, Marlene drifted in and out of low-wage jobs, addiction problems, and more arrests. In the 90s, she stood before a judge once more, charged with forgery and fraud. Legally, the killings were out of sight. Her record was hidden, and her name was changed. She never explained why she wanted her parents dead beyond saying they controlled her and she wanted freedom. The facts are clear. A teenager plotted to kill both of her parents, hired someone to do so on her behalf, and was out of juvenile detention in 5 years. The case was called the barbecue murders because of how the bodies were burned and how deeply it horrified everyone. Not for money, not by accident. It was about control. It was about power, and about a girl who thought she could kill and get away with it. And in so many ways she did. That's all for today. Which of these cases was the most shocking to you? Let us know in the comments below. If you're looking for more strange true crime stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We've got a whole lot more where this came from, and trust us, you won't believe what's coming next.